Let's take a deep breath as you settle comfortably in your chair, releasing any stress of the morning. Close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so, and take another deep breath as we join our hearts in this quiet time together. As you take your next breath, I invite you to consider that everything in this life has value and purpose. The problem with most of us is we often cannot see it in ourselves. As we look around and the situation around us, the results of this many times is personal insecurity that causes us to live defensively in constant protection mode. But we at Unity have faith that the divine has never created anything without value and purpose. And this includes us. Let us affirm, I am of great value. I have lots of opportunities to contribute goodness, not only to myself, but to those around me. I affirm that I make a difference. So let's just affirm that one more time before we take it into the silence. I am of great value. I have lots of opportunities to contribute goodness, not only to myself, but to those around me. I make a difference. In the silence, let's reflect on the positive ways we make a difference to this world. As we return our attention to the present moment, Let us pray. Thank you, God, for making me a valued person. Thank you for all the opportunities to be of service to others. And thank you for my life of goodness. Amen.
And we've been talking about being in the flow of life, and with the great Reverend Eric Butterworth, a great book by extraordinary great minister. And today we want to talk about part 3. Oh, first I want to read this to you. This is what we're looking to get out of this series of teaching: a consciousness of the dynamic flow of life, that we may experience a progressive outforming of this flow in creative and dynamic ways in every phase of our lives. Pretty good stuff, huh? And so that's what we want. Today, part 3, the healing stream. And I want to start out by sharing, how many of you ever liked the comedy series Seinfeld? Isn't it one of the greatest of all time? I would rank it with I Love Lucy and the Andy Griffith Show. It was just great. And I've loved this show. I remember I used to work for the Clorox company when the show was, coming out each week. And we had 2 shifts at Clorox. We had a day shift and an evening shift. And we would rotate 8 weeks between the 2. And during the evening shift, when we were on that, we would have what we called Seinfeld night. And what would happen, one of the guys' wives would record the latest episode on her VCR and quickly transport it to the plant, where we could watch it during our meal break. And so Seinfeld night, we always looked forward to it. Love that show. And this particular instance, you might remember, George Costanza, you remember George? He was the most neurotic of the group, wasn't he? He fulfilled that old saying continually, hoisted on his own petard. That's George, continually doing that to himself. But this particular episode, I remember, he came into that coffee shop where they all convened. And he said, I've come convinced every decision I ever made in my life has been an abysmal failure, and I haven't been able to decide anything good. And Jerry challenged him and said, well, if everything you decide is wrong and bad, why don't you decide the opposite of what you'd normally be inclined to do? And said, maybe that'll make the difference. He said, I'm going to do it. What can I lose? So he said, and I'm going to start with lunch. Instead of ordering a burger, fries, and coffee, I'm going to order a salad, chicken salad sandwich, and a cup of tea. Jerry said, what could go wrong? And after he placed his order, he sees a girl at the counter, a very attractive girl, looking at him. And Jerry said, hey, that girl's looking at you. He said, so what? What good's it going to do me? He said, do the opposite. Do the opposite, George. He said, I'm going to do it. He walks up to her and said, I noticed you were looking at me. She said, yeah, you ordered the same lunch I did. He stops and reflects for a moment. He said, my name is George Costanza. I'm unemployed, and I live with my parents. She goes, hi there. I'm Victoria. He's, wait a minute. Something's happening. She gets him an interview with the New York Yankees, George Steinbrenner, the owner of the New York Yankees, for an administrative position. And instead of going the usual route of trying to, flatter and get on the good side, Mr. Steinbrenner holds out his hand to shake his hand. He said, sorry, sir, I can't shake your hand. I've watched your massive ego destroy our beloved Yankees. George Steinbrenner says, hire this man. He's like, and so he said, it's happening. If I do the opposite, everything's falling into place. And I got to thinking how being in the flow of life is kind of like that. In many ways, it's the opposite, isn't it, of how we would normally do things. What society says, this is how you handle people, this is how you insult people back if they insult you, and the conventional wisdom of how you live. How many know in the flow of life can be very opposite of that? Isn't that true? At times, living in the flow means doing what goes against human nature as we think of it. And so we want to continue to look at living in the opposite, if you will, living in the divine flow. That worked well for George for a while. Sadly, nothing works for George long. So, in fact, he said, I think this doing the opposite is my religion. Jerry said, then your Messiah would have been the Antichrist, I guess, right? It's the opposite. But there is a place of being in the flow means, seeking connection with Source. And Source will frequently tell us, instruct us, lead us to do things that seem to defy conventional wisdom. Isn't that true? And so we want to live in that place of the opposite, the other side, because there is where the flow of life is. And that's what we'll look at this morning concerning the healing stream. Now, Unity was originally founded to promote essentially prayer and healing. Our founders, Charles and Myrtle Fillmore, were touched by divine healing in their bodies. Myrtle, in particular, was under a death sentence. She had tuberculosis, which in that day meant you're going to die. And she got a hold of the Unity principles at a meeting she was at and began to say, I'm a child of God. I don't inherit sickness. I'm not going to accept it anymore. And said it was a process. She walked it out 2 years, but she was ultimately completely recovered from tuberculosis. And so she began to teach this. And her husband, Charles, experienced healing from a long-term defect in his hip. And so healing was a huge part of Unity and still is. And so I was looking up Wikipedia's description of Unity. And it says, Unity emphasizes healing by spiritual means, but does not reject or resist medical treatment. And that's certainly true, isn't it? I mean, all these are various aspects of healing, aren't they? However they come. As Butterworth said, either through medication or meditation. They're all valid, aren't they? We know what Reiki, energy modalities, people experience healing, Western medicine and surgery, diet and exercise. I mean, very important to health and healing. Isn't that true? I like to say, and as a former smoker, I can say this freely, you can't just keep puffing on those things and say, they're not going to hurt me. God will keep me from getting ill. It really don't work that way. Like this lady I heard about, she was struggling with her weight, and she came up with a novel new idea to deal with her weight. If she was served a piece of cake, she would go, I cast the calories out of this cake in the name of Jesus. How many know that's not how it works? You got to actually cast the calories out by not eating the cake. Isn't that right? But diet and exercise, very important means, of health and healing. And then there Eastern medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture. Carolyn was healed in her back through acupuncture. Long-term problems in her back from working at FedEx and completely healed through that particular. So there are many channels that healing flows. Isn't that true? And none of them are to be looked down upon. Chiropractic. I personally have experienced relief through chiropractic. I mean, I was having back trouble at the age of 40. Somebody said, you ought to go to a chiropractor. I said, I don't need them, bunch of quacks. After a year of trying to stretch it out, I said, where's a chiropractor, please? Chiropractor, witch doctor, I'll take it. Whoever will give me some relief. But after my first visit, I felt better and have continued, to utilize them to this day. And I'm doing great. Don't have any trouble with my back at all. So there are many channels, aren't there? Faith and prayer are valid channels, not to exclude medical treatment, but along with medical treatment. I believe they supplement and at times can even take us beyond what medical treatment can do. And then something we introduced here recently, well, I call it soaking prayer. And it's something that a number of people have experienced blessing and healing through, emotional and physical healing that we've started. So there are many avenues, aren't there, for healing to take place. And Butterworth starts out in this particular part of the book saying, there are some people that have this attitude, everybody gets a break but me. Some people get all the breaks, I don't get any of them. They're healthy all the time, I'm always sick. They're prospering all the time, I'm always pouring in debt. Some people think that way. He said, he quotes an Egyptian saying many people hold to, there are some people it seems like they can fall in the river and come up with a fish in their mouth. Isn't that right? And it seems like that's the case with some, doesn't it? So Butterworth asks, are some of us on the right side and others on the wrong side of life? Are there sides to life? Are some doomed to live in pain and suffering because they're not on the right side of life? And there are those that say, well, it's God's will that I have this affliction. I personally don't go along with that. And even if that were true, why would you go to seek medical treatment if it's God's will? Hey, let God have his way. No, I don't think that's true at all. But there's some people that think that. Either God has called me to be afflicted, or some people just got a special blessing that I'll never get. I remember, again, George Costanza he was concerned, said, God's out to get me. I think I got a disease. And Jerry said, you don't believe in God. He said, I do for the bad things. Poor George. But I believe, along with our mother, healing is a universal tendency that's taking place, a continual flow, isn't it? There are aspects of healing we certainly don't understand. I don't understand why some receive it and at times seems others don't. Why some prevail and others will pass, from this life. I know in our soak in prayer back in Memphis, there were people that had some beautiful results physically. And then there was another lady, she was battling cancer. And it seemed like we were prevailing. Said there were tumors that were going away. The doctor confirmed it. But she ultimately did succumb to the disease. Does that mean we give up? No, I don't think. I don't know why, but not knowing, because I don't know why now, don't mean that I can't understand why later, you see. And that's the whole process, reason behind medical research, isn't it? We don't know why people get this, but we're going to keep trying till we figure it out, where we can treat it. One of the greatest gifts to the world is from where we came from in Memphis, Tennessee, St. Jude's Children's Research Hospital, dedicated to eradicating childhood cancer. And because of their research, there are children whose lives have been saved and going to continue to be. But there's things they don't yet know. And because we don't know them, don't mean that we should give up. Isn't that true? Keep trying. Keep persevering. Medical science does it. I believe metaphysical studies should do it. Okay, we're going to keep praying for people. There are those that may pass away, but we're not going to give up trying to save everybody that we can and help everybody that we can. Isn't that true? So never get the impression if you're battling illness, well, there's something wrong with you. I don't think that, and I would never say that. There are times we all battle various things. Isn't it true? As I get older, I find there are things that I'm dealing with I didn't have to deal with when I was 25, and now I'm now 65. I think, when did it change? How did that happen? There are injuries that I suffered when I was younger that now, oh, wait a minute. I remember when that happened. How come I'm just now feeling it? So, but it's okay because we grow. The healing stream continues to be at work, and we need to continue to adjust our consciousness to it. Isn't that true? So, we see that healing is a universal tendency. Concerning some people getting all the breaks, he gives a quote from Richard Rumbold, kind of cute. Said, I could never believe that Providence had sent a few people into the world, ready, booted, and spurred to ride, and millions ready to be saddled and bridled and ridden. I'm with him. I don't think that's true either. It's a recent phenomenon in human history, fairly recent, that sees the connection between physical illness and mental processes. This is something that throughout human history was largely not understood. They would attribute disease to, either a demon or a family curse, but they didn't understand the consciousness, mental process affecting the physical body. And more we know that it does, doesn't it? And so medical science understands more and more health is mind and body, and that many illnesses are emotionally induced or influenced. Some say 50%, some say up to 90%, but we know it's a lot. Let me quote to you from a very reputable website called Neurolaunch, which looks at the connection between the mental process and physical health. It said, the emotional causes of illness list connects specific feelings and psychological states to measurable physical conditions. From chronic anger raising heart attack risk to unresolved trauma reshaping how our immune system functions decades later. This isn't vague mind-body wellness talk. It's documented physiology. Cortisol pathways, inflammatory markers, and nervous system responses that turn emotional strain into diagnosable disease. It's a fact, isn't it? And the better we can adjust our thinking, our emotions, our consciousness into the healing stream, I believe the better we'll be, don't you? I really do. Let's see. I think I need to catch up the slides. Butterworth said, the secret of healing of any kind is to correct the conditions that are impeding the natural flow of life by altering states of consciousness. In other words, there are things we can do in our thought life and our emotional life that will benefit our physical body. Isn't that right? I don't think anybody questions that now. Just what extent that is, we're still learning that. And I think we're going to learn more and more what that means. In addition, along that line, let me read to you just some of the testimonies from our soak in prayer. It really brings this out. Listen to this. He said, my first time soaking, and I experienced for a long duration the quiet mind, the lack of negative thoughts that I have most of the time. I will definitely come again. Another one, relaxed shoulders and lighter spirit. Thanks. Another one, first time, beautiful. Energy flowed, felt wonderful. This one, after 3 soaks, my spirit feels lighter and my laughs are belly laughs. This one, my first time in attendance, wonderful. Feeling was great. Full relaxation, feeling oneness with all. So grateful, words cannot express. This one, the soaking is like a bridge that spans Sunday to Sunday for me. And what stood out to me in these, most all of them talked about a sense of emotional well-being, emotional lightness. How many know that so often precedes physical change? Isn't that right? Because if our emotions and our thoughts are in line with the healing stream, the results will follow in our bodies so often. And so Reverend Butterworth talks about a concept that I call fishing on the right side of the boat. And it's from the book of John, John's Gospel, chapter 21. It's a story about the disciples of Jesus. Many of them were commercial fishermen, and they would fish all night long and catch their fish at night. And one night they came back to shore, and they told Jesus, we didn't catch anything. Terrible night. And Jesus said, well, here's what you need to do. He said, cast your net on the right-hand side of your boat. Now, bear in mind, these guys have been fishing all their lives, since they were young. Here's a carpenter who'd never fished, trying to tell them how you do it. And so here's all you need to do, put your net on the other side. Now you can imagine what was going through their minds. Jesus, I don't think you know how this works. See, it's all water, and there's a boat, and which side the net goes really makes no difference. I would have said that, or thought it anyway. I might not have said it. And they said, whatever you say, Jesus, we'll give it a shot. And lo and behold, it said their nets were so full of fish, they nearly broke. And so, in other words, they worked all night, no fish, cast their nets on the right-hand side. And Butterworth said this illustrates living on the right and wrong side of life, because there is a right and wrong side. And so we want to look at what it means to fish on the right side of the boat. As he quotes from Shakespeare, Julius Caesar, said, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings. In other words, let's assess, could it be something that I can change that would make this better? Isn't that right? And we ought to ask ourselves that, not in a condemning way, but say, maybe I can make an adjustment that would make this better in my life. And so often we find that's the case in how we think and how we operate in the emotional realm. Now, the disciples in consciousness, Butterworth said, were out of the flow of life, and they got no fish at all. By the act of casting from the other side, they changed their entire experience. In other words, like George, they went the opposite. Isn't that right? And experienced something extraordinary. Butterworth says, turning in thought from negative to positive, from moods of insufficiency to attitudes of confidence, one may alter one's whole experience from failure to success. On the right side of life, we get in tune with the inexorable flow of good. And he talked about, it says they toiled all night and caught nothing. Toiling all night, that is, nothing will help if we're on the wrong side of the boat, no matter how much effort we put in. If we're in a negative state of consciousness, all of our efforts won't amount to much, if anything. We want to be in the healing stream or the universal flow of wholeness, don't we? What does it take to stay in that? We must determine that. It's an individual journey for each of us, isn't that right? I mean, we all have to find what works for us. Isn't that true? I know when somebody suggested Carolyn pursue acupuncture, I thought, Carolyn and needles, I don't know. But it turns out that was the method God used to bring healing to her. It might not work for everybody, but it certainly did for her. And we each have to find in our own journey what makes it happen. Isn't that true? Because we're each individualized expressions of God, and we're each individual flows of wholeness. And we need to determine, what is my particular flow? Because the universe, Butterworth said, desires to express its flow of life as us. He said health is not something we get physically in pills or potions, or metaphysically in prayers or treatments. We cannot get health, we must be health. We must be an expression of the divine, which is health, wholeness, and healing. Health as the reality of life, the normal condition of humanity. To quit seeing it as abnormal and see it as very normal, and disease and sickness being the abnormal condition. Cornell University, he cited a study they did about what makes healthy people healthy. And it was determined healthy-mindedness is the key to bodily health. Healthy-minded people tend to be healthier. Or it put it this way, habitual attitudes that make people impervious to social situations and surroundings. Habitual attitudes, making us impervious to the society around us, influencing what our health is. He talked amusingly about an ancient Chinese practice of paying a doctor to keep you well and stop paying them when you get sick. That would revolutionize the healthcare system, wouldn't it? All right, here's the deal. I'm going to pay you regularly as long as I'm healthy. I get sick, I quit paying. Will that ever happen in the United States of America? Probably not. But it is an intriguing concept, isn't it? The emphasis on wellness, isn't it? As opposed to curing, keeping well so you don't get that disease or that illness. Isn't that true? It's a very valid concept that I wish the medical community would, get more enthusiastic about. But how many know you don't collect money from people that are healthy? And so we want to continue, to be healthy and operate in wellness, in an attitude of wellness and practices of wellness. Isn't that true? I know in Unity at one time, it was taught there was no such thing as hereditary illness. Well, that's not accurate. We know that people do inherit things, don't they? Yours truly inherited hyperlipidemia from my dad, who inherited it from his dad, who went back probably to my great-great-grandfather. He was a Confederate soldier. Maybe that's where it started with him, being, serving in the wrong army. But this has passed on, and I was telling the guy we were talking about. I said, I deal with hyperlipidemia, which is too much fat in your blood. I said, our family, our fat tends to be in our blood. He said, my family, our fat tends to be somewhere else. But this is some hereditary, and it's something that my father, my grandfather did not manage well. They smoked, they drank, they didn't. My father was so sedentary, he never exercised. I thought, this may be something I got to deal with, but I'm going to do it different. I'm going to quit smoking, which I did many, many years ago. I'm going to exercise regularly and build myself up and be healthy and strong and take what I need to take, to head this off. And it's worked well. 65 and the picture of health, wouldn't you say? But, we got to recognize and manage those things and find the path, the healing stream in them. Isn't that true? Healthy-mindedness. Myrtle Fillmore, as we know, she was under a death sentence with tuberculosis. She was given a few months to live. When she got a hold of Unity principles, she lived 45 more years. From a few months to 45 years. Not bad. Because she cast her net on the right side of the boat. She started thinking different, opposite. Isn't that true? Her complete recovery took 2 more years. How many know it don't always come like that? In fact, usually it doesn't. Got to walk it out, isn't that right? Walking it out, not getting discouraged, bad days, you don't give up. You keep going, and it works. Heredity has an influence, but we choose to buck the trend of heredity and look for the healing stream. As Butterworth said, God is a circle centered in each of us. A fundamental truth. All else are incidental facts. Hyperlipidemia, that's an incidental fact. The central truth for me is the healing stream. Right? Fishing on the right side of the boat is the unrestricted flow of life and healing. And Butterworth makes the point, the fish were always there, But the change from discouraging emptiness to joyous fulfillment was not in the habits of the fish, but of the attitudes of the fishermen. Is that right? And how many know the healing stream is ever flowing? We just got to adjust our consciousness, our attitudes, to continually partake of it. Isn't that true? He said the healing stream is an eternal reality. He talks about, this is a Butterworth quote, I love, he's got these little things. The allness even within the illness. The allness even within, I love that, don't you? Even if I'm battling illness, the allness is still there. It has not changed. And so I'm going to find it afresh and anew, connect with it, and see it transform the situation. There is healing and renewing taking place even when we are unaware and don't even do anything. He cites a study from a former professor of Harvard Medical School. He said most illnesses are cured without the victims ever knowing they had them. So there are post-mortem exams that reveal traces of diseases which the subject had conquered and didn't even know it. He talked about the body having a super wisdom, biased in favor of life rather than death. Continual healing stream. In acupuncture, they really understand this. They talk about the chi, or the life force, which is essentially the healing stream. And sticking them funky needles all over you is helping to unblock that chi. Incredible concept that Western medicine has not fully taken hold of. In fact, probably not at all. But it's very valid, isn't it? Acupuncture is the unblocking of the chi, or life force, and getting it flowing. As someone said, the physician binds the wound, but the healing stream heals the cut. You've heard, haven't you, about the overprescribing of antibiotics? Everybody heard about that? Giving them out so freely that people's immune systems no longer work the way they're designed, because you're relying on drugs to do it instead of what the healing stream that's already present. And I know many physicians have cut back on overprescribing and let people's immune systems do as they're designed. Very important. So, we desire to eliminate resistance to the flow. How many electricians we got in here? Yeah, Steve's an electrician. You know Ohm's law? I never can remember Ohm's law. But what it relates to is the flow of electricity and resistance. How many know as the current flows, a certain amount of resistance enables us to utilize it properly? But how many know in regard to the healing stream, you don't want any resistance? Isn't that right? You want it completely unblocked and allowed to flow completely unhindered. And he said, resistance begins in the mind, and our self-limiting attitudes are poor conductors of the flow of life and healing. Limitation of our consciousness produces stress, giving rise to all manner of ills experienced in the physical body. And if we're always tired, there's times everybody gets tired, but if we're always tired, I know for me, I say, why am I always tired? I shouldn't be always tired. Or some days I should feel really good. Why is that? I know when I started here, I was very daunted by doing 2 services. I've never done it before in my life. And after the first time, I thought, how can I keep doing this? I was exhausted, man. It's not just delivering the message. I like what Seinfeld said about his stand-up comedy. So this may not look like work to you, but I put a lot in it. That's me. That's me. But I got to think, with the energy of delivering the message, and I always try to give it all I got, and then greeting people afterwards, which I love to do. But that's a depletion of energy. I'm giving energy away. And before you know it, oh, man, how am I going to keep doing this? And I realized what I was relying too much on intellectual processes instead of accessing the flow of divine energy. I thought, I believe I can do better. And lo and behold, I have. Now I'm energized by the end of the second service. I'm not, a wreck and a mess. And I take a good nap in the afternoon, but not because I'm depleted. It's just a good idea, right? But, I learned to access that divine energy. And so I'm good, man. I'm super duper. The thing is, when greeting, spending time with people, which I love to do, there's an energy draw there. It's a part of it. So I realized there's something I needed to do a little different, because I like to greet people before and after service. I realized doing it before service was an initial depletion of energy. So the reason I walk out after we get started, not because I'm appearing like like a movie star or something. But because if I get with you beforehand, my energy is already getting used up a lot. So I try and save it. So when afterwards, I can just lay it out there, man. It's all over you. But we learn, don't we, to access this energy. And if we're always tired, there can be physical reasons, be related to diet and exercise, rule those out. And ultimately, I'm going to connect with Source, which energizes my life. Isn't that beautiful? In fact, I got something on that. Those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. The word wait here is very interesting in the original Hebrew language. It literally means to bind together. Those that bind together shall renew their strength. Bind together with what? With Source, with the divine source of energy and life. When we're feeling depleted, we need to take time through meditation, through prayer, through reading and study, through interaction with those that give life to us, and recharge. Isn't that right? Bind together with Source and renew ourselves. Butterworth said 9/10 of all fatigue in healthy persons is due to psychological, not physiological factors. Financial worries, job stress, emotional upset of all kinds deplete our energy. But he says a Niagara of energy is constantly available within us, only dammed by forces which we may be unaware of. But as we wait and recharge, we remove the barriers and release astounding stores of energy. Nutrition and exercise are valuable for that, along with this vitalizing force. As he says, this really speaks to me because Carolyn, continually corrects me on my dietary practices, and I need that because I tend to eat crappy food by nature. And so she's, constantly contending with me and helping me. Said, as we're consciously in the flow, we will be guided to eat those things that our body requires. Our taste will change to desire what we need, not just what pleases our palate. Remember recently, dear, I ate that asparagus? So I'm growing. Butterworth said, before we have that first cup of coffee, establish ourselves consciously in the flow of life. You ever seen those people wear those shirts, warning, I've not had my coffee yet? But, we need to realize that it shouldn't be just a caffeine jolt to get the day going. The priority should be to connect, to bind to the divine source, isn't it? To plug in first thing. To determine to fish only on the right side of the boat of life. And when somebody asks how you're doing, even if you're not feeling particularly great that day, we can honestly say, I'm in the flow. I'm in the flow, Daddy-O. That's a good one. You can use that. I knew a guy in my former church. I never got over the 70s, so from time I'll say, can you dig it? And this guy was so cool. I'd say, can you dig it? He'd say, both shovels, Daddy. So these are good affirmations, you see. Good affirmations. Emerson says we should gird ourselves about with incessant affirmatives. And in a way, when we say things like that, we do. Butterworth ends with this. There's a small difference between going from nowhere in the healing stream to now here. And the difference is more than spelling. Going from nowhere to now here is a matter of consciousness, isn't it? Realizing the glorious power of the healing stream that's always available. Let's make our affirmation in closing, if you'll stand with me, please. You've been so kind. I've gone over a little longer than normal, so do bless your hearts for being here still. Would you repeat after? This is from Butterworth, from the book, and it's an old hymn, a line from an old hymn, just perfect for affirming the healing stream. Repeat after me. Flow, flow, river of healing.
Flow, flow, river of healing.
Blessing greater than wealth.
Blessing greater than wealth.
Flow, flow, cleansing, revealing.
Flow, flow, cleansing, revealing.
God's gift, freedom in health.
God's gift, freedom in health.
It's beautiful. Love you all. Thank you. Have your seats.